You never think a few flowers could cost you $500, but then again, you've probably never lived under an HOA. It started with lavender, rose of it. My grandmother used to plant it when I was a kid, and every time I caught that scent, I remembered her porch, her laugh, her hands in the dirt. So when I bought my first house-quiet cul-de-sac, picture-perfect community, I knew what I wanted to do: create a tribute to her, a garden. One that was vibrant, peaceful, mine. I didn't go wild. I didn't tear up the lawn. It's just a clean, curved patch in the front yard. Some lavender, marigolds, a small sign that read, "In memory of Rose." My neighbors complimented. Kids stopped to sniff the flowers. People smiled. Then the letter came. Bright white envelope, black lettering. The kind that carries bad news dressed in legal politeness. Notice of non-compliance, violation of HOA landscaping guidelines. My stomach dropped. The letter claimed my garden didn't match neighborhood aesthetic standards, specifically unauthorized modifications to lawn layout, use of non-standard plant species, and presence of unapproved signage. And below, in bold, fine, $500, $500 for a garden. 4 flowers. I was stunned, shocked. Then I got angry. I called the HOA office. Spoke to a woman named Cheryl who sounded like she'd swallowed a rule book and washed it down with vinegar. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, "but the HOA has the right to enforce landscaping compliance for the visual cohesion of the neighborhood. Your changes were made without prior approval." I explained it was a memorial garden. It wasn't harming anyone. That half the block had solar lights, gnome statues, even an inflatable flamingo, and none of them were fined. She replied flatly, "Those residents were warned." "You are being fined? Warned?" I got no warning. I hung up the phone with my blood boiling. I stepped outside, stared at that little patch of earth I had carefully planted with memory and love. And in that moment, I made a decision. They wanted a fight. It's fine. I was done being polite. The next day I started documenting everything. Photos of every house with lawn decor, garden gnomes, unconventional flowers, screenshots of neighborhood, Facebook posts praising my garden, copies of the HOA handbook, emails requesting clarification on the so-called violations, a certified letter disputing the fine. I wasn't just angry, I was preparing for war. And just like clockwork, the HOA fired back. Another letter, more formal. Failure to pay fine within 10 business days may result in a lien place on your property. They were serious. But so was I. I posted on the community board about what happened, shared my story. Within hours, my inbox was full. Messages from neighbors who had been fined for small, harmless things. A dad fined $200 for painting his mailbox navy blue instead of black. A retired teacher charged $350 for installing a bird bath without permission. A young couple forced to remove their garden swing. It was like peeling back a rotten wall. Suddenly, the mold underneath was visible. This wasn't about aesthetics. It was about control. And at the center of it all, HOA president, Martin Green, a man who walked the neighborhood every morning like he owned it, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on. The self-declared sheriff of suburban compliance, people feared him. He knew the handbook better than the board itself, and rumor had it, he personally reviewed every single violation report. So I did something bold. I invited him to my house. He showed up on a Friday morning right on time. Polo shirt tucked tight, pen ready. "Mr. Thompson," he said coldly, "you requested a meeting?" I nodded. "I'd like to discuss the fine. My garden." He looked down at it. "You're still non-compliant." "I've read the handbook," I replied. "There's no clause that prohibits lavender, no rule about memorial signs, there's no specific plant list, only maintains standard neighborhood design, which is vague." Martin didn't flinch. "It's about harmony, uniformity. If we allow this, we open the door to chaos." "Chaos," I laughed. "It's lavender, Martin, not a junkyard." He adjusted his glasses. "You can appeal, but you won't win." I held up my phone. Actually, I already filed with small claims court. His smile faded. "You sued?" "No. Not yet, but I will. For harassment, arbitrary enforcement, and emotional damages. And I'll bring every single neighbor you find without cause. His jaw tightened. You won't win. We'll see. And then I handed him a copy of the HOA's own handbook, highlighted, and annotated, and tabbed. You picked the wrong guy to mess with, Martin. He turned and walked away without a word. But I saw it in his face. For the first time, he wasn't confident. He was worried. That weekend, things changed. More neighbors joined me. We started meeting, sharing letters, compiling evidence, stories, emails. We formed a small coalition. Neighbors tired of the bullying, tired of the fear, and I filed the lawsuit. Official, certified. Small claims court. Claim: arbitrary enforcement of HOA rules and undue emotional stress resulting in punitive damages. Amount $5,000. And the best part? I represented myself. Most people would have backed down. Most people would have just paid the $500 fine, ripped out their flowers, and moved on. But I wasn't most people. This wasn't about the garden anymore. This was about power, about abuse, about a small group of people with clipboards and titles thinking they could steamroll over common sense and community kindness. So when my court date arrived, I walked into that courthouse not just with documents and photos, but with purpose. Had my file folder, thick, tabbed, labeled, emails, HOA guidelines, photographic comparisons, testimonies from over a dozen neighbors who'd faced arbitrary fines, and a signed letter from the county horticulturist stating that my lavender plants pose no legal, environmental, or aesthetic threat to the community. Across from me sat Martin Green. He looked like he'd walked out of a country club catalog, polished, pressed, cold. He was flanked by a lawyer, some big HOA representative from the management company, but I didn't flinch when the judge called my name. I stood tall. Mr. Thompson, please explain the nature of your claim. I cleared my throat and started with the story. Not just mine, ours. I talked about how I built the garden to honor my grandmother. How I received no warning, no courtesy call, just a $500 fine. How other residents had faced similar treatment. Handed over a stack of documentation. Your Honor, I said, this isn't about a flower bed. This is about selective enforcement. It's an HOA that punishes without logic, consistency, or compassion. I'm seeking $5,000 in damages for emotional stress, loss of community peace, and time spent defending against an unjust penalty. Martin's lawyer shot up. Your Honor, the HOA operates under contractual agreement. Mr. Thompson agreed to abide by community rules upon purchase of his property. The judge nodded, flipping through the binder I had submitted. But the rules must be applied fairly, must they not? Yes, Your Honor, the lawyer said, but uniformity is key. We can't allow residents to make changes that alter the neighborhood's visual harmony. That's when I struck. I pulled out the photos, printed full color, dated mailboxes in different colors, gnome statues, mismatched flower beds, a 10-foot-tall metal flamingo on one neighbor's lawn. None of these were fined. None of these were flagged. Only mine. Why? The lawyer stammered. Martin shifted in his seat. I pointed across the courtroom. This is not about rules. It's about control. It's about one man who's used his position to play HOA overlord. And this time, he pushed too far. The judge looked up, silent for a long moment. Then she asked, Mr. Green, do you have any documentation showing prior violations being issued to the other homes in these photos? He blinked. Double quotes, no, Your Honor. These were not deemed violations. Mr. Thompson's was. Yes. And can you explain how lavender constitutes a violation when plastic flamingos do not? Martin looked trapped. It's the design, uniformity, so it's a judgment call, the judge pressed. Not based on explicit rule, but personal interpretation. The lawyer tried to speak, but the judge held up her hand. I've seen enough. And just like that, it was over. The ruling came down in under 15 minutes. This court finds that the HOA acted in a discriminatory and inconsistent manner in its enforcement of landscaping violations. Judgment awarded to the plaintiff in the amount of $5,000. Boom. Martin's face turned gray. His lawyer looked like he'd just lost $1 million case. The courtroom was quiet, too quiet. But me, I was glowing inside. I won, not just for myself, but for every neighbor who had ever felt bullied, silenced, or squeezed by HOA overreach. But the story didn't end there. News spread fast. That evening, the neighborhood group chat exploded. Did you hear what happened in court? He actually beat the HOA. Martin lost. Finally. People started stopping me in the street, shaking my hand, asking for copies of my court filings. One neighbor baked me cookies. Another offered to help expand the garden. I realized I had unintentionally become a kind of symbol. The guy who stood up and didn't back down. The guy who said enough. But that victory rattled more than just Martin. Within days, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. For restructuring, I showed up not to gloat, to make a point. The room was packed. Residents standing shoulder to shoulder. Some had never even shown up to HOA meetings before, but now they were invested. When Martin stood to speak, the crowd went cold. He mumbled something about community standards and court misunderstandings. But nobody was buying it. Someone raised their hand. I motioned to call for a leadership vote. Martin turned white. Another voice chimed. In seconded. And just like that, the board was overthrown, by vote, by voice, by the people who were finally done being bullied. Some stories end with revenge. Mine ended with growth, literal growth. Rows and rows of lavender, tulips, and roses. And something more powerful, the growth of a community that finally found its voice. After the court ruling and the HOA shakeup, everything changed. Martin Green, the man who once patrolled the sidewalks like a tyrant in cargo shorts, was officially voted out. No more clipboard. No more petty threats. No more $500 punishments for planting flowers or choosing the wrong shade of mulch. The new board? It was made up of real neighbors. People who lived there, raised their kids there, barbecued on weekends, waved to each other at the mailbox. People who cared more about kindness than rules. People who saw beauty in gardens, not violations. They asked me to join. At first I said no. I was tired. I'd fought my battle. But then I realized it's the only way to protect the peace was to be part of it, so I accepted. And the first motion I introduced, the Community Freedom Garden Act. It allowed homeowners to plant flower beds, install memorial signs, grow vegetables, and create personal landscapes as long as they maintained cleanliness and safety. Simple, logical, human. The motion passed. Unanimously, in my $5,000 settlement. I didn't keep it all. I used $1,000 to expand my garden stone borders. A small bench with my grandmother's name etched into it, and a wooden arbor at the front gate that read, "Planted with Purpose." The rest, I donated to a new neighborhood beautification fund. We used it to help an elderly couple rebuild their collapsed garden shed, plant trees near the community park, I'd buy flowers for every corner lot in the neighborhood, host a garden day where kids and parents painted pots and planted seeds together. What started as one flower bed turned into a movement, but not everything was picture perfect. One morning, about 2 months after the HOA restructure, I saw someone standing in front of my house. Martin. He looked smaller, older, not physically, but humbled. I walked outside, expecting confrontation. Instead, he simply said, "It was never about your garden." I waited, he sighed. I lost my wife 2 years ago after that. I didn't know how to control anything, so I controlled what I could. That hit harder than I expected. We stood in silence for a while. Then he gestured to the arbor. "It's beautiful. She would have liked it." I didn't say much. Just nodded, because sometimes, even when justice is served, it leaves behind quiet scars. He turned to leave, then stopped. "I'm sorry," he said, "for the fine, for the fight, for forgetting what neighborhoods are supposed to be." Then he walked away. Since then, the neighborhood's changed. People talk more, kids play outside longer. Sunday potlucks have returned. Garden signs and flowers now line nearly every lawn. And every spring, We host the Rose and Lavender Festival in honor of the very garden that started it all. They even named the main walkway near the park Thompson Lane. It's not flashy, it's not marble, just a small wooden sign with my name. But it means everything, because it's proof. Proof that you don't need power to make a difference. You just need courage and a little soil. Final voiceover moments, soft piano underneath. If you're ever walking through my neighborhood, you might see it. That front yard, now filled with more than just flowers, filled with memories, laughter, healing, and purpose. And if you stop for a moment, you might just smell the lavender and you'll know that's the garden that cost $500 and paid back a community in full bloom.